All right. I'm Sam Gustin. I'm a correspondent at Vice Motherboard and a fellow at the Berkman Center up at Harvard. We have a very special guest today, Gigi Sohn. So thank you very much, Gigi, for coming up from Washington. As you guys know, Gigi is currently special counsel for external affairs in Chairman Tom Wheeler's office at the FCC. And prior to that, starting in 2001, she served as president and CEO of Public Knowledge. And from 2011 to 2013 as co-chair of the board of directors of the Broadband Internet Technical Advisory Group. We're going to do a little Q&A, and then at the end, we'll open it up for a few audience questions. So before we start, Gigi, I just want to address a procedural matter, which is, could you just give us a brief update on the release of the actual text of the Open Internet Order and explain to everyone the delay a little bit?
Sure, but before we do that, I actually want everybody to give themselves a round of applause. Because you built that, okay? I know that just about everybody, if not every single person in this room, and 3.99 million other people weighed into the FCC, and trust me, it had a huge effect, obviously. That, and we'll talk about other things that may or may not have happened, but you guys, your activism over the years, working with you has been a privilege and an honor, and I hope, is that what we're going to toast later on, David?
Yes.
Because it is quite an accomplishment. And those of you who know me know I've been in this field for a really long time when nobody gave a darn about any of these issues. And it started with SOPA PIPA, and it culminated in this, which is amazing because SOPA PIPA, as Andrew and Mika and other people know, was all about blocking bad legislation, which is not easy, but it's easier than getting something affirmative and literally turning a policy completely around and getting, I mean, guys, it's a huge victory, and I hope you realize that. So congratulations to you all. So now, for the minutiae of procedure. So as people know, the FCC operates under what's called the Administrative Procedure Act. And under the Administrative Procedure Act, you put out a proposal, and my boss, Chairman Wheeler, put out a proposal in May. It wasn't very popular. And we took 7-8 months of notice and comment on it. We had policy roundtables at the FCC. We did, I think somebody told me there were 747 ex parte letters. Those are basically extra filings outside of the comment period where people came in to try to convince us one way or another of how we should go, were filed at the agency. And the agency takes all those filings and puts together, or at least the chairman's office, puts together a draft order that circulates to the different commissioners, the 4 other commissioners. So that happened 3 weeks before last Thursday. It happened on February 5th. It's circulated to the commissioners. The Democratic commissioners offered edits. The Republican commissioners, it's not going to shock anybody, did not. Okay, the order was voted last Thursday on February 26th, and for those of you who were there, it was really an amazing, perhaps the most amazing time in my policy career, and the chairman admitted it was the proudest day of his policy life, public policy life, which made me feel really, really good. Well, what happens is after the vote, things are not over. The order is not ready to release, particularly when it's as controversial as this. For those of you who were there or were watching on TV, saw that the Republican commissioners had very, very long dissents, which they gave orally and then put in writing. We have to take those dissents and address them in the body of the decision, because if we don't, we risk a court saying you didn't address all the arguments. And in fact, there's a recent court case that says that if an agency does not address the positions of the dissenting commissioners, that could be a reason for overturning the order. Now, as you all know, we've already lost twice on this issue. We ain't going to lose a third time. And we're sure as hell not going to lose a third time because we haven't addressed the dissents of the dissenting commissioners. So they did submit their dissents, I believe it was yesterday. Now we're going to go back to the order and make sure we've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. But trust me, we want to get this thing out and get it out quickly.
Thank you, Gigi, for explaining
If
that.
I could just say one other thing.
Sure.
If you want a shorter version of what I just said, the FCC General Counsel, John Sallett, just posted a blog to the FCC blog yesterday that explains all of this much better than I did.
Thanks, Gigi. So let's move on to some of the bigger picture issues away from the minutia, as you said. I think everyone in this room understands net neutrality and why it's an important concept, but why was it important to establish net neutrality protections under Title II? Could you start with that?
Sure. The chairman believes, and his staff believe, that the only way we were going to get the strongest net neutrality rules that prohibits blocking, throttling, paid prioritization, discrimination was to ground it in the strongest possible authority. As I just said before, we lost twice under Section 706. And after the Verizon decision came out, I think it became, I don't think it was exactly clear to the chairman at the very beginning, but it became abundantly clear that the strong rules, the strong bright line rules that he wanted to impose would be very, very much under threat if we proceeded just under Section 706. And let me explain. While the decision does reclassify broadband internet access service as a telecommunications service, we also do use our authority under Section 706 and under Title III. So we really have two belts and suspenders to try to win this thing in court. And I think we feel very confident. Both the Brand X decision, which was the Supreme Court decision that in 2005 that said, well, the FCC classified cable modem service as an information service. We don't think it's the best decision, the best reading of the statute, but it's not wacky. It's not arbitrary and capricious, as they say in the legal trade, so we're going to uphold it. But the Brand X decision and the Verizon decision itself, the one that struck down the 2010 rules about a year ago, basically said you could reclassify if you wanted to. So we feel that we're on very, very strong legal ground here, and that Title II really was the only way we were going to be able to get the kind of rules that ensure that gatekeepers don't mess with an open internet.
Thanks, Gigi. You alluded in that comment to how Chairman Wheeler may not have fully realized or appreciated that Title II was the best path at the beginning. Could you kind of talk us through the evolution in Chairman Wheeler's thinking? Because it was kind of a remarkable evolution to watch how his thinking in public speeches and blog posts evolved over the years. So how did we get from there to here?
Yeah, understand, Chairman Wheeler, who is a brilliant man, if you've ever spent time with him, is a really great guy, great values, very progressive. He's not a lawyer. And for 99% of the things the FCC does, that's a huge advantage. Trust me, the guy can read a budget, he can read a spreadsheet, he knows how to manage. But, understanding sort of the niceties of the law in this area is something that, if you're not schooled in the law, doesn't always come naturally to you. And I think over time, he started to see, again, why Section 706 was not going to be adequate. So let me talk about a couple of kind of data points of what happened over the year that we've been looking at this. Understand that the commission gets dozens, frankly, scores of informal complaints all the time. Okay, they don't, a lot of them don't bubble up to the top. But one area where we got tons of complaints were people complaining that their Netflix was loading slowly. In fact, the chairman himself noticed that happen. He has a house on the Eastern Shore. I can tell you I noticed it as well with my Verizon Fios service. So interconnection became a thing, and something that we got dozens and dozens of comments on it. So in June, we launched an inquiry to look at why was this happening. But in 2010, this was not happening. The interconnection market has completely changed. So that started to happen. And then in August, Verizon, as many of you know, were throttling unlimited data users. And he was pissed. And it was funny because I was the one trying to say, well, maybe you should just talk to them first and, hear them out. And he's like, no. And he sent them a letter basically saying, look, this is not reasonable network management. What you're doing here is you're using an economic or business justification to manage your networks. And then he started looking at the mobile universe. And this is something that I had told him previously, but I think this kind of brought right to the fore that mobile voice continues to be regulated under Title II, has been for 20 plus years. And guess what? Investment has flourished. The world has not fallen apart. So he went to CTIA, which is the Wireless Industry Association, and basically said, in almost no uncertain terms, net neutrality should apply both to wireless and wireline. And then by September, October, he started to realize that Title II had to be part of the solution, that some of his fears that Title II might dampen investment, that it could be over-regulatory. He also saw that in the way wireless voice is regulated under Title II is many of the provisions of Title II are not applied, or as they say, forborne from. So that became his model for what he wanted to do here and what ultimately happened.
Thanks. I definitely want to address this because we saw an extraordinary public outpouring. I mean, you alluded to 3.9 million public comments. Talk about the role of the public, that just deluge of comments. Were you prepared for all those comments? I think perhaps the FCC's website may not have been fully prepared for all of those comments, but can you talk about the role of the public and all those commenters?
I think one of the myths that I've already sort of seen in various and sundry places is that there was one person or a handful of people or 10 people responsible for what happened. Folks, this is a group effort, okay? It wasn't just John Oliver, and it wasn't just, I'd see Margaret and Kevin, they had a role. No, I mean, look, it was a lot of people. It was the public interest groups, the folks you know of, the free presses, the public knowledges, the Fight for the Futures, the National Hispanic Media Coalition, the OTI. If I don't name you, it's not that I'm forgetting you. It's those folks who played an inside and outside the Beltway game. It was the folks like Malkia Cyril at the Center for Media Justice and some of the other, United Church of Christ, NHMC again, who went and browbeat the folks, Joe Torres, I see over there, went to the Hill over and over again and got people like Keith Ellison and Charles Rangel on a good day to say title. He couldn't make up his mind, but I think eventually made up his mind the right way. I mean, in 2010, 2009, I remembered, if you were a CBC or a CHC member, you were not on the Title II side. Okay? Those guys did unbelievable amounts of shoe leather up on the Hill, and they changed people. And when Keith Ellison did his little dance, I did a little dance too, and I said, I know who did that. All right, so that was huge. The folks who turned around traditional progressive Democrats who normally would be in the pocket of the ISPs, humongous. And then, of course, there was the public. And, some people said, you can see, I will not name some of these people because if I do, I'm just going to get angry, who say, copycat, copycat comments and robo comments and that kind of thing. If people took the time to put in a comment, that was important to us. And I don't care if it had a few of the same words or 5 of the same words or 10 of the same words. The fact that people took the time to put their name and address on something calling for the strongest possible net neutrality rules, and in most cases, calling for Title II reclassification, I have to say that blew my mind. All right? Yes, my boss was surprised at the 4 million outpouring, but I thought at best we'd get people saying they wanted strong rules. But to actually call for the thing, okay, and for John Oliver to call for the thing, and for the President of the United States to call for the thing, that's pretty amazing. And that took a village. It took a country, quite honestly. So that's why I gave you guys applause, because I know a lot of you who were the leaders of this movement are out in the audience. But 4 million comments, way, way, way surpassed what the next biggest number of public submissions, they weren't comments per se, that were made to the FCC. I think almost triple plus.
You alluded to Capitol Hill and a couple lawmakers on the Hill, so I just want to sort of touch on politics very briefly. Now, Chairman Wheeler is a very smart guy. He's been in Washington, D.C. for many, many years. You know, in his prior career, obviously he interacted with lawmakers. He had to have known early on last year that the politics of this were fairly intense in terms of the potential pushback if he went toward Title II. So how important were the kind of political calculations in the process, and as a follow-up, how important was it for him to get political cover from the likes of Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, like real leaders who said, you know, over the summer, we've got your back?
Well, look, there were key people on Capitol Hill. I saw Adam Lockman, I think he's back there, working for Senator King. He was there from Senator Angus King from Maine, there from the very beginning. People like Kristen Gillibrand, Chuck Schumer, who you would never expected. Roche left, but let me tell you, Mika and Andrew probably are the two people most responsible for Chuck Schumer, who generally goes along with Verizon on things, to be on the Title II side from the get-go. So we had about 13, 15 senators, and that's a huge difference from 2009, 2010. Right off the bat, and not all people you would necessarily consider to be the left of the left wing. So that political cover came right away, and in the House as well. Pelosi was there from the get-go. Harry Reid came along later on, and look, that was very, very important, don't get me wrong. But the political cover from the Hill, from the very, very inception, was important. And then again, you know, people say, well, the president pushed the chairman. No, the president gave the chairman political cover to do what he wanted to do. So it was greatly appreciated. It was one of almost 4 million comments, but to have that cover from the president was particularly important.
Now, I don't want to belabor this point, but the role of President Obama in this whole thing has been kind of a source of controversy over the last couple of weeks. There was I think now famous photo of Commissioner Pai holding up the order underneath the portrait of President Obama. We've got people in the Wall Street Journal calling it, Obamanet. I don't want to harp on this, but very clearly, how do you respond to people who say, you know, once President Obama came out for Title II, this was a foregone conclusion, that was what sealed the deal, Wheeler had no choice on this?
Yeah, I think people weren't paying attention. Of course they're going to say that, right? The people who want to see strong net neutrality rules fall are going to say it's somehow politicized by the president, but they hadn't been paying attention like the rest of us have been paying attention for the past year about what's been going on. I would also say, you know, I'm not quite sure what's nefarious about a president getting on YouTube, all right? How transparent can you get? All right, and offering his comment. By the way, NTIA, which is the sort of the administration's arm of the Department of Commerce, also filed comments. So there was nothing, you know, cloak and dagger here or secret. The president got on YouTube and said, you know, this is what I want. But by that time, the die had already been cast. And let me just say another thing. Presidents, at least from Nixon on, have weighed into the FCC. I mean, Nixon was famous for using the fairness doctrine and you know, bullying the FCC to try to hurt his political enemies. You know, Reagan weighed in on the financial interest and syndication rules. Clinton weighed in on religious broadcasting and alcohol, and sometimes they got, their chairs moved in their direction. Did they do it because the president told them to, or because they were already inclined? Hard to say. So this notion that the president weighing in on not perhaps, the biggest telecommunications policy issue of all time that attracted 4 million comments, is that weird or is that normal? It seems to me it's pretty normal and a reaction to the public will.
Thanks, Gigi. I would pivot a little bit. This has been something that has kind of driven me up the wall a little bit as a journalist over the last couple of weeks and months. But some FCC critics and a ton of press, even like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, have described the new rules as utility regulation or utility-style regulation. And And I think I may have actually used that word, at one point over the last year before I stopped. Are we talking about utility regulation or utility style regulation? And if it's not, why is it not? And as just a final follow-up on that, aren't we just sort of parsing the language here? I mean, isn't this basically utility style regulation, and this is just word games?
Well, now we know, because David Eisenberg told us so, that neither the New York Times or Wall Street Journal is media anymore. So who cares what they have to say, right? But let me explain why what we voted on is not utility or utility style regulation. But let me tell you why people think it is, okay? And it's understandable. So the reason why what we have done is not utility style regulation is because there's no price regulation, there's no tariffs, there's no administrative burdens or service requirements. That is what normally characterizes utility style regulation. And in fact, my former colleague John Bergmeyer, Public Knowledge, has written very eloquently about that. So I would ask that you read his blog. And the price regulation, this is something that we've been fighting over the Republicans with, because technically, right, under Section 201, we can decide what is a just and reasonable price, term, and condition. So they're like, oh, you're leaving the door open to price regulation. Well, the problem is that we have decided not to apply every provision that would be a mechanism for us to do this. Okay, so these are, who cares, Section 202, 203, 204, and 205, okay? Those are the mechanisms, the hearings, the adjudications by which we would determine whether a price is fair or not. All right, so we're forbearing from all of that. So when somebody says, oh, the door is open to price regulation, well, yeah, the door is open if Jeb Bush gets elected president tomorrow for his FCC chair to come in and undo everything we've done. It won't be that easy. You can't just snap your fingers and do that. But don't buy the next chair could do X, Y, and Z. Also, as my former colleague Harold Feld points out so beautifully, is actually Section 706 today gives us the ability, if we find that broadband is not being deployed in a reasonable and timely fashion, to impose price caps. So that sword of Damocles is already over our head and has been over our head since 1996. So it's really a lot of nonsense. But let me explain to you why I think that people look at it that way, even well-meaning people like you, Sam. And the president even said this. People believe that the internet is essential, okay? Like water, like electricity. In fact, I think some people would give up their water and electricity before they gave up their internet. All right, so utilities are essential. Common carriers, which that's the kind of regulation we're doing, common carrier regulation, is non-discriminatory, and that's the difference. But I do think the vast majority of people think the internet is essential, and it's true. If you go to school nowadays, you've got to have internet not only in school, but at home. At our meeting last week, there was a story of a woman, because we did something else very special last week as well. We preempted the laws of 2 states that were prohibiting, yes, Deb Sosha's clapping, broadband from
Don't worry, I'm gonna get there, Deb.
Community broadband from expanding in those states. And there's this great story of this woman, and she stood up, and I thought like she was like total deer in the headlights. She has to drive her kids, 12 miles to the local church so they can do their homework. And North Carolina's schools are very wired. They have got like gigabit service in all the schools. But they have nothing. They have no broadband in their home. So, this is essential for people to participate in the economic life, the creative life, the education life of this country. It hasn't been a luxury for a long time, but not even the ISPs say it's a luxury anymore because they know it's not.
That's actually that's a good segue into the community networks portion of last week's festivities. I think net neutrality got a lot of attention, but I think that there's a credible argument possibly to be made that in the long term, it's possible that the community networks would or may, I don't want to compare, but it could have a profound impact on this country. Maybe you could explain to the audience first where Chairman Wheeler was on that, because if you listen to some of his some of his speeches, blog posts about that, he came across as really, really passionate about the idea of community networks, and it was almost like a light bulb went on at some point over the years. So talk about his thinking and how he came to feel so strongly about this issue.
So the chairman has a mantra, competition, competition, competition. And he is the first FCC chair to say that for broadband speeds that are real broadband speeds, right? So 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second up, there's not enough competition. 75% of this country has a choice of 1 or 0 broadband providers at that speed. Okay, so how do you get that competition? Well, one way, I'm not saying it's an easy way, but one way is to allow local communities to decide for themselves what kind of broadband competition they should have. And these laws, which, hey, it ain't no secret, okay, that the cable and telephone companies went to the local state legislatures, and I don't know if people know how state government works normally, but oh, my buddy gave me a bill, why don't I introduce it? I mean, the notion that this was the will of the people was a bunch of nonsense. So, basically, we knew that there were some folks who were, interested in possibly challenging their state laws. The chairman mentioned it in a speech, and lo and behold, a couple months later, we had these 2 petitions from North Carolina and Tennessee.
Thanks. You mentioned Chairman Wheeler's mantra, competition, 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 which he repeatedly deployed throughout the year. In terms of the new definition, the baseline definition of broadband at 25 megabits per second down and 3 up, or what is it, 4 up that you just
3 up.
3 up that you just mentioned. How does that change the national competitive landscape, and specifically with respect to consolidation in the industry and potential M&A activity? I'm not going to name any names.
Because I can't say anything about that.
Right, but does that change the competitive landscape on a national basis? I mean, I think I saw a statistic that now, well, as you said, 75% of people don't have either 1 or 0 options at that speed. So how does this change the competitive landscape?
So let me change your question, Sam.
Thank you. I love it when my interview subjects do that.
I mean, let me ask the audience a question. Does anybody in this room believe that a definition or a benchmark for broadband of 4 down, 1 up is anything but a joke? Anybody want to stand up and be brave? I mean, what the chairman looked at is the way people use multiple devices in the home. And they're streaming videos and games and schoolwork, online learning. The notion that anybody could do anything that's necessary to participate in society today with 4 down, 1 up is a joke, right? So even if 4-1, it wasn't a fantastic competitive environment. You can only imagine what it is at 25-3. And what that does is it compels my boss to try to find other solutions. It's not easy. Okay, so what else are we looking at? We're looking at the special access market, an issue that some people in this room have been involved in for God knows how many years. But I think you should expect that we'll start moving on that pretty soon. We put out a notice of proposed rulemaking. I know that's one of those terrible words you should never use, Tim said, on how we can incentivize over-the-top programming, right? So, unfortunately, the dearly beloved Aereo couldn't take advantage of this, but how can we get more folks in the video space providing cable-like services over broadband? So I hope, if you haven't participated in that, I hope you will. So we're looking, we're open for ideas. How can we get more competition, not only facilities-based competition, but also competition in the video space and for other broadband services? Really important to us. There are not a lot of easy answers.
Thanks, Gigi. I'm going to figure out one more. I've got my eye on the clock. So one more kind of big picture question, and then we're going to open it up for a few questions to the audience. This is something that has sort of struck me as someone who's covered these issues now for several years, a while. Telecom policy, it used to be like kind of esoteric policy stuff that was like debated by specialists and lawyers. It was kind of an arcane, area. And now, all of a sudden, or for the last 6 months, it's front page news. How did that happen? How did we get here to where these issues are now on the forefront of sort of the national consciousness, the national media, and the forefront on Capitol Hill?
So I think I'll end where I started. I think it's because of you guys. Okay, it's because you have raised a profile with almost no money, and at the beginning no visibility, and you were smart, and you have smart funders. We haven't given a hat tip to my former employer, the Ford Foundation, who paid for an awful lot of messaging around net neutrality and other issues. So, I mean, it really begins with you guys, and it also begins with something else I said, is that broadband, the internet, is the most democratizing medium, the most powerful medium we've ever known. When I started out working for a guy named Andy Schwartzman in 1988, we were fighting to make broadcasters and cablecasters be better public citizens. It didn't work all that well. Okay? The internet blows that to bits, right? It puts the power of communications in everybody's hands. At the meeting, we had Chad Dickerson, the CEO of Etsy, come and testify. And before the meeting, he gave my boss a bunch of thank you notes from Etsy sellers, these handcrafted things. And you almost really want to cry. And Chad told the story of this woman named Nancy who was in a terrible car accident, who basically was able to continue making a living because she sold her handicrafts on Etsy. That is powerful. What you're seeing going on in Ferguson and Staten Island and around the world, that wouldn't have been possible if Rupert Murdoch owned all the media. It's possible because of the internet, and people know that. And I think that's what has brought it to the fore, is that people realize we have an extremely powerful means of communication here, and we're not going to lose it. Okay, we're not going to lose it to a handful of powerful gatekeepers.
Thanks, Gigi. Okay, we're going to open it up for a few audience questions. But before we do, we've got one sort of procedural note, and it's a testament to David's incredible judgment and timing on this whole thing. I mean, how about the time? You guys have to admit, the timing on this thing is pretty unbelievable. So I don't know how you pulled that off, David, but kudos to you. So there.
No. What didn't I do?
So we are in the sunshine.
Right, so let me explain it.
Okay, Gigi's going to explain
I hate to
this
take away your role, Sam,
It's
because
okay,
you're such
fine.
a good. I love you interviewing me, but let me take this one. So, can I get another bottle of water? My mouth is really dry. No, this one is.
Here's another one.
Oh, thank you.
Unopened.
So, as I said before, because we are dealing with the newly submitted dissents, the net neutrality order is not out yet. So we are technically still in the sunshine period, where if you get up and make say, you should have this in the order, you're going to have to file something with my agency, okay? In fact, actually, you can't. Actually, you can't even say anything, right? Because I'm not inviting it. I don't want you to say those things to me. So please, if you want to ask me a question about the net neutrality order, ask me a question. Don't argue with me. Don't make a presentation, because you're technically not allowed to, all right? Now, I can say things to you, but you can't really say things to me.
How about that? All right.
But you want to ask me about other things that are not under sunshine? Also, the community broadband thing is also under sunshine. So that one is pretty easy to understand. We preempted the laws. Yay! So yeah, now I'm double-fisted. So I'm not sure
How
there's
about
a lot of
that?
questions.
Why don't we start right there in the back with this gentleman who has his hand up, please.
Very quickly, Mike Weisman.
Hi, Mike.
And I come to you as an ambassador from the upper left-hand corner of the map. And this was an effort in which people from every corner of this country contributed. And I think that that's really important, because I come out here all the time to the left, to the East Coast. People kind of forget about all that stuff past flyover country, but it exists. It was very, very important. Now, question, Gigi, I'd like to ask you some more of this kind of inside baseball stuff about your role. I saw that you had like a public engagement role, and that was something that was new to me. And is that something I hope that this is something we can learn more about your role in helping to bring the public voice to the commission.
What do you think I do all day, Mike?
Please tell us more about it.
So, yeah, so, I mean, look, my role is outreach, right? I am the principal outreach person for the chairman, and I would dare say for the whole agency. And obviously, you know where my roots are, so, you know, I'll talk to anybody and I'll reach out to anybody, but it was critically important to me, and frankly, look, the chairman hired me, all right? That in and of itself should have said something to people, all right? He hired me because he knew how important you guys were all going to be to the process. And when he hired me, we still had a chance of winning the DC Circuit case. In fact, I prayed every day we would win it, but we didn't. But in any event, that is my role, is to be the outreach person, to be the voice of the public in the chairman's office. Now, you know, there's some people on the outside who think it's a dirty word that I have advocated for certain positions in the agency. So does everybody. Every senior staff person has their own position they advocate. I don't think that's a dirty word. And again, I think that's why the boss put me in there. And we have people with very differing backgrounds in the chairman's office. And they have different positions on things. But he listens. And this is, you know, the chairman and I are very different in most ways, but in one way we are very similar. When he says something, people think he is intractable and can't be moved off of it. But the fact of the matter is he actually listens to folks and can be moved if a good case is made. So remember that in the future as well.
Okay, why don't we take one from over here? Yes, you, sir, in the back. Yes.
All right, awesome. Jeremy Pesner. I asked this question not to be cynical, but just so we can get some clarifying aspects and hopefully really solidify the roots of this whole thing. I've read one article on the subject, and I'm sure people are saying the same thing, that while this decision did go the way that people in this room wanted to go, that it had more to do with the positions of Facebook and Google and all the other content companies that had sort of thrown their weight behind this, rather than less so than the community activists that are in this group. What's your thoughts on that?
Is there a specific article that you're referring to? Because I think I know the one you're talking about. But
I can't remember off the top of my head. It's on Facebook, you know.
anybody? Yeah, it's a no comment. Anyway, Gigi, go ahead, please.
Well, you know, it's all Milo and Rick's fault. But I mean, look, the fact of the matter is Google and Facebook sat this one out, all right? So I don't know what this person was smoking or where they got their information. I mean, at least Google, to its credit, and after some hammering, came out and said that Title II would not affect their investment in Google Fiber. Facebook has said nothing. So I don't really know where that comes from. I trust that got people in this room roundly panned that, and that's obviously not the prevailing wisdom either. The prevailing wisdom is that it was a Netroots effort, including many of the public interest groups represented in this room, and including a lot of the small companies, Tumblr, Etsy, Kickstarter. The chairman, I came down with the chairman, was it in June, July? And we had a meeting in Dumbo in Etsy's offices, gorgeous offices. And there were, 30 people around the table. Every single one said Title II. That was pretty amazing.
And I would add that those companies are New York-based companies.
Yes, they
most
are.
of them, which I have to give a shout out because I'm a New Yorker, so it's worth noting. Okay, I think we have time for one more. So why don't we go in the back to you, sir, in the blue shirt.
Thanks, Sam. Jeff Roberts speaking on
Hey,
Twitter.
Jeff.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
Gigi, thanks for coming. I guess my questioning covering this thing's been fascinating. I try to stay somewhat impartial. But I was struck in the last 2 months how partisan it got on left and right. And do you ever worry that this sort of victory might lead to kind of victory lap and making it kind of a pet project of the left? And it just sort of seems like fast internet shouldn't be an ideological issue.
So let me give credit to folks who are making this not a partisan issue. I will say people on Capitol Hill are making it a partisan issue, but that doesn't reflect their base. You know, there's this group called the Internet Freedom Business Alliance, right, which has, you know, is bipartisan and has folks like the National Realtors Association and Goodwill Industries and others not exactly thought of as, you know, left-wing companies. A lot of the Republican base has weighed in favor of what we're doing. Some of you may have known that when Ted Cruz first called net neutrality Obamacare for the internet, he got roundly savaged by people in his own base. So the notion that this is a partisan issue is really a fiction of people that just don't want these open internet rules. But let me just say one other thing. That was the last question, right? Kind of in closing. The battle really has only begun, okay? Everybody should toast. Big victory. Again, congratulations to you all. But this is the beginning, okay? There are going to be several different fora where, you know, the FCC is going to be attacked. Folks are going to try to defund us. They're going to, you know, the chairman's going to be taken up to Capitol Hill. He's already, I think, testifying 4 times in a week or in a week and a half. I mean, people are going to try to grind the FCC to a standstill so we cannot enforce these rules. So if you care about these rules, like I said, have a short celebration, take a deep breath, and then get geared up for the next couple months of battle. And then, of course, possibly the court. I mean, people think definitely the courts. I'm hoping that at least the big ISPs think about all the value that shareholders have gained under a net neutrality regime, at least over the last 4 years, and decide that maybe, you know what, we didn't do too well the last time we sued. You know, it kept ending up getting worse for us. So maybe we should just sit this one out. It's light touch Title II, and look, you know, I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that some of the big dogs, as my boss would like to say, will actually sit this one out. It may be that some of the little guys will sue, but believe it or not, for good or for ill, it actually is meaningful to a court. If it's Verizon or Comcast in court, as opposed to, you know, I think Mediacom is one of the smaller cable operators has been making noise about suing, a court looks on that differently. And so even though I think we're going to win the case, it would be nice to not have all the big dogs in court throwing all their resources at us. So again, gear up for the next year or so, court, Hill battles, and you guys worked for it, and now you got to work to preserve it.
Gigi Sohn, thank you very much.
Sam Gustin, thank you very much.